I will speak a little in a little wider context first before I come to Spectrum in Germany. Wearing my hat as the chair of CIDOC, I would like to advertise a little bit the work we are doing in CIDOC, and I will talk a little bit about collections management policies. CIDOC published in 2013 the principles of documentation, and they say that CIDOC believes that collections without adequate documentation cannot be considered to be true museum collections. And this is because they cannot be adequately safeguarded and cared for. The museum cannot demonstrate legal accountability, and their value for research and interpretation is greatly reduced. And this is something why documentation is so essential and is highly supported by the work which has been done and you are doing in UK over the years with Spectrum. This statement of principles, which we have agreed on in Rio, it's version 6.2, and it says that, it quotes at first the ICOM Code of Ethics, which say that a policy framework which sets standards and define procedures for documentation work, and which respects the legal and ethical environment within which the museum operates. So this is something which already the ICOM Code of Ethics requires and requests. And we continue saying that this means that sufficient staff resources are necessary to operate the documentation system effectively, and manual and/or computer-based systems to hold the information within it. Also, we say that the adoption of national and international standards where appropriate, taking into account the local requirements. That's exactly what you explained, Gordon, now, the development of Spectrum originally in UK and being discussed and localized in other countries. We say that we have to have complete and up-to-date records, and there has to be effective access to information so that staff and the users of museum can find what they need. But of course, in cases depending on the usage, you need access controls to prevent inappropriate access to restricted information. And also there is a necessity of security measures in order to preserve and protect the information within the documentation system and to ensure that it remains usable. Also something which is stated within Spectrum as well. So there is a real need, and that is said as well, for collection management policies in the museums. And they, as being stated also in your guidelines, should be supported by written documents that support and define the museum's mission and purpose. They should also address various aspects of museum collections and management, and define how museums handle collections and make them available for research and public access. Define the scope of museums' collections and the role of the parties for managing them, the collections, the museum collections. And they are changing documents that should always be practiced, and museum staff should regularly review their museum policy. So aspects which you can find in the set in the Spectrum framework, as I can say. These conditions are something which we have been discussing in Germany over several years, and quite a long while ago, as you said already, Gordon. We have been looking at what you have been doing in UK with your colleagues, the museum colleagues with Spectrum, and decided this is something which is really relevant for our German museum community as well. And therefore, we have in the special interest group documentation in the German Museum Association established several years ago already a working group on collection management. This working group on collection management is handling in Germany. It's a group of colleagues from different areas from all over Germany. And this group worked on, since very early times, on the translation and the localization of Spectrum. So at the time we worked with Spectrum 3. At the time we also said that we need, beside the very thick book Spectrum 3, we decided that we need to have some more basic information, and that's why we created the charts, and with a short explanation about kind of the basics for each of these procedures. And in a way, these were the early ones, and in a way, in this case, they were reflected in the work you have been doing in UK, because I think you thought also that it was a good idea to have this in addition to the more detailed and very
comprehensive.
Very comprehensive Spectrum. Here that was Spectrum 3, 3.1 and 3.2, which we have been translating. That's just a view into one of the meetings of the working group, where we have been discussing. And as we are all native English speakers, quite often we were not sure whether, if the wording in the original Spectrum was a little bit different, it changed, whether this wording really meant a difference, or was it just out of editorial reasons that this. So this caused quite some discussion. How is this meant? And Gordon, you may remember in several cases we came back to you asking, is there a difference if you put it that way or that way? And we got your help in order to understand what was meant with these parts.
Yeah, I mean, that's because quite often the words being used in Spectrum are English, but sometimes not quite as it normally is done in English.
Yeah.
So particularly, for example, the unit names, information names are slightly twisted, but because English is so flexible, we can do it in English, but I'm not sure in other languages.
Yeah, but there was also probably a point why you changed some of them when making the latest version of Spectrum 5.
Yeah, so you're going to have to look at it. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a photo from Spectrum 3.1, the German version of it. We had it printed as well. We have it has been published in 2013. And we distributed it widely. We had, I think, at the time, 1,000 copies printed, 3,000 copies printed, and they are distributed in many museums all over Germany. So this is, you can see the the long ongoing work. We start this working group on first we called it Spectrum, later on we called it collection management. This working group started in 1999. It was ongoing. We had Spectrum. We started with Spectrum 2, then we had Spectrum 3. This was published then. Then we worked on Spectrum 4. Before we had Spectrum 4 finished, you started to work on Spectrum 5. We decided to skip Spectrum 4 and worked on Spectrum 5. If COVID-19 would not have come in between, Spectrum 5 would be available already now, but because of the COVID-19 epidemic, we were not able to have a meeting, any physical meeting this year. Usually we have about 4 physical meetings, 3-day meetings, so over the year, really discussing about the drafted translation, which have been drafted by one of the group or 2 of the group, and then it's being discussed together. And depending where a person comes from, archaeology, art, or other areas, we have to find an agreement what be appropriate as a German translation for it. So in order to really make Spectrum widely known and also show its wide application possibilities, since 2008, we have been organizing annually a conference. They have different topics each year, and we pick the relevant part of Spectrum as part of this annual conference. And discussing the situation relating to this topic in Germany. Well, here the titles are in German, but I can say just for example, one year it is standards in theory and praxis. Another year it is usage of collections. Another year it was about loans in, loans out. In 2019, we had a conference with the topic difficult collections. So how to document difficult collections, what can be done, where are the challenges about that. And we had so many topics related to that and questions related to that, we decided that the next year's conference, which was planned for this year, would continue to talk about difficult collections. Well, then, because of COVID-19, we decided to postpone the conference until 21. So it will be held hopefully in 21 in Wiesbaden, in a more or less not far away from Frankfurt. And again, it will be a possibility also to discuss about what has been what you have been working on in the last couple of years then. So that's the short report from the situation in Germany and a little bit some context from CIDOC's point of view.